Hi, my name is Dylan and welcome back to Chapter 5, the Barron's AP Economics book. I'll be outlining what you need to know in this chapter for the AP exam, both micro and macro, and then I'll be explaining each concept in depth. So here's what you need to know for this chapter. You need to know what total revenue is, what price elasticity of demand is, how to calculate it, and how it affects revenue. You also need to know what cross-price elasticity and income elasticity are. And you also need to know limits and degrees of elasticity. And lastly, you need to know what tax incidence is and how it affects suppliers and consumers. So what is total revenue? Total revenue is the total money you gain from selling a product. It's simply the price multiplied by the quantity sold. However, it's not the same thing as profit. Profit is how much you make, so it's revenue minus costs. But revenue is just how much you take in. Elasticity measures the responsiveness of a good to price changes. More specifically, it measures how the quantity sold or bought of a good will change after a change in price. You can use this to calculate changes in total revenue and whether or not to lower or raise a price at a certain point. To be unit elastic means that at a certain elasticity, a change in price is met with a corresponding and equal percentage change in quantity. For example, if the price increases by 20%, the quantity change will also change by 20%. And inelastic means that changes in price are greater than changes in quantity. So if there's like a 20% increase in price, there will only be a 10% change in quantity. And elastic means that changes in quantity are greater than changes in price. Now, elasticity can be calculated by a formula. Percent change in quantity demanded divided by percent change in price. Now please remember that for demand, if price increases, quantity decreases. And if price decreases, quantity increases. This is important to remember because there's no such thing as negative elasticity. So when you calculate elasticity, if you don't know the relationship, you will screw up somewhere. Now, elasticity again is used to determine how changing price of a good will change total revenue. If the elasticity of a good is equal to 1, then it's unit elastic. If it's E is greater than 1, the good is elastic, and if E is less than 1, it is inelastic. So now I will demo this problem here. It's a problem you often see on the AP test, and it has to do with calculating elasticity. So first, you need to use the elasticity formula, which is just the percent change in quantity over the percent change in price. And this is, you can do this by taking Q2 minus Q1 over Q1. And this will calculate the percent change in quantity over the percent change in price. And this is just equal to 20 cents over 1 over 10, negative 10 over 100. And this is equal to negative 2. But in elasticity, the negative signs don't matter. So the answer is 2. And since 2 is greater than 1, this good is elastic. So there are different types of elasticity, as I mentioned before, and they can be shown graphically. So right now I will draw a perfectly inelastic graph. So this is your axis, of course, and this is for demand. And a perfectly inelastic demand looks like this. This should be perfectly straight and vertical. And basically what this means is buyers will buy this good at this quantity at any price. At any single price they will buy this quantity, but they will not buy less or buy more. And a perfectly elastic graph looks like this, perfectly horizontal. Of course, you'll never actually see these in practicality, but this is just to show the relative extremes. However, there are in-between degrees of elasticity. A relatively inelastic graph has a very steep slope, and it looks very close to this one here. It might look like this. It's a very steep graph. And basically what this means is that a big change in price won't really change the quantity because the slope is so steep. And a relatively elastic graph might look like this. where a small change in price will lead to a big change in quantity. However, the slope of the graph does not mean elasticity. It's just to show that a small change in price will lead to a big change in quantity, like this. Cross-price elasticity measures the relationship between two goods and whether or not they are complements or if they are substitutes. If the sign is positive, it means the goods are substitutes. If the price increases for good A and people buy more of good B, it means that due to the higher price, people are replacing good A with good B. If they are negative, the goods are complements. This is because if the price increases for good A and people buy less of good B, it means that people buy both at the same time. And since less good A will be purchased, less of good B will be purchased as well. While a price elasticity is a mathematical concept, why a good might be inelastic or elastic is determined by some other variables. For example, the period of adjustment will influence the elasticity of a good. What this means, in the long run, a good will always become more elastic than in the short run. Think about oil. If the price of oil were to increase now, nothing would really happen because we all need oil and we will buy gasoline at any single price. But in 10 years, because we all know the price of oil is increasing, eventually we all switch to electric cars or hybrids and our dependency on oil will decrease. If the price of oil will increase in 10 years, there will be a much greater change in the quantity demanded because the dependency on it would have decreased by then. Also, if a good has no substitutes, it will become more inelastic. People can only buy that good and they will buy it regardless of the cost. If it has tons of substitutes, people become more responsive to price changes. And lastly, if the good is really cheap, people won't really notice the price changes. If it's really expensive, the effect on the household budget will increase. People will notice the price change more. Income elasticity measures the effect of a change in consumer income on the consumption of good. Just like how elastic goods are sensitive to price changes, they are also more sensitive to income changes. That's why E is greater than 1, because if consumer income changes, the consumption of the good is even greater. If people make more money, they'll feel more inclined to buy expensive goods. But even if they're richer, they're not really going to buy more bread or stuff they would buy on a normal basis. If the ratio is negative, it means that the good is inferior. If people make more money and they buy less of a good, it means they're replacing the inferior good with the normal good. Elasticity of supply is the same concept and idea as elasticity of demand, except when prices go up, suppliers sell more. This sign doesn't matter either way, and the determinants of elasticity are the same. E is equal to 1, that's inelastic. E is greater than 1, that's elastic. E is less than 1, that's inelastic. It's not as important as elasticity of demand, but it may come up on the AP exam. So this last topic in this chapter is called tax incidence. Basically, what happens when the government decides to tax a good. So let's draw our axes here. So this is the supply of the good, and this is the demand of the good. This is the equilibrium price. This is the equilibrium quantity. So let's say the government says, let's tax this a number T. And so as we know, taxes are one of the determinants of supply. So the supply is going to shift vertically up T. So it's going to go up. Let's call this S plus T. So as we know, the new equilibrium price is going to be up here. And draw this down. Okay. So this is how taxes work. The government collects this region here, or how much the graph vertically shifted, and this is called T. What the supplier will do is they will charge a higher price for the good, and so this is how much the buyers pay, and this is actually how much the suppliers get, because even though the buyers pay this much, the government collects this, and so the suppliers only get this. And so this region right here is how much of the tax burden, as we call it, falls on the buyers, because the buyers pay an additional this much. And however, this is how much the suppliers pay, because originally they would have gotten this much money, but now they only get this, and this is how much the suppliers pay the tax. So this is called the producer burden. This is called the consumer burden. This is called the producer burden. This is important to know. This is called the deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is basically an inefficiency resulting from a tax. Because originally there would be buyers willing to buy goods here, 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 and here, but because the price of the good is higher, they won't buy it anymore. And so this is basically lost production, lost quantity, lost stuff that could have been sold. And so oftentimes the AP exam will ask you what happens for the tax burden if the demand graph is inelastic or if it's elastic. If the graph is inelastic, it means that the slope is going to be steeper. And so because of the tax, it basically means the suppliers, they can charge a really high price for the good because of the tax, which means that the buyers will have to pay more. And if they pay more, it means that more of the tax burden will fall on the buyers and less of it will fall on suppliers. And this basically means that the consumer burden will increase and the producer burden will decrease. The opposite happens if it's elastic. If it's elastic, the producer burden will increase and the consumer burden will decrease because it's elastic. So the producers can't really charge a much higher price for it, and so the producers have to bear most of the burden. And then, so you could calculate the tax revenue by calculating the quantity tax, which is this distance right here, multiplied by the new quantity down here, and this is called the tax revenue. That's it for this chapter. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something from this video.